Hey crew, it's Pitt and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Manly Hall. We are in the Secret Teachings of All Ages. We're up to chapter 17, I believe. Now, they're not numbered, so I have to try and remember, and I'm terrible at that. I think it's chapter 17. This is Flowers, Plants, Fruits, and Trees. But before we begin, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if you at any point in time get lost in the weeds, it is a lot easier to keep up if you begin at the beginning, and there are several different playlists linked in this corner and in the box down below with the original source material so that you can go back and try to understand what I'm talking about. I do try to explain myself as we go along, but sometimes I just forget. It's part of what I do. And so we're going to dive in. We're going to talk like we are reading and discussing. It's not the format for everybody, but a lot of people seem to enjoy it, so we're going to do it. We're going to talk about flowers, plants, fruits, and trees. The yoni and phallus were worshipped by nearly all ancient peoples as appropriate symbols of God's creative power. The Garden of Eden, the Ark, the Gate of the Temple, the Veil of Mysteries, the Vesica Piscis, or oval nimbus, and the Holy Grail are important yonic symbols. The pyramid, the obelisk, the cone, the candle, the tower, the Celtic monolith, the spire, the campanile, the maypole, and the sacred spear are symbolic of the phallus. In treating the subject of priapic worship, too many modern authors judge pagan standards by their own and wallow in the mire of self-created vulgarity. The Eleusinian Mysteries, the greatest of all the ancient secret societies, established one of the highest known standards of morality and ethics, and those criticizing their use of phallic symbols should ponder the trenchant words of King Edward III, Honi soit qui mal y pense. Now, I think that this is the word for human, this is the word for bad, this is kind of like a qualifier. It's been a long time since I took French, and I'm pretty sure that this is French. I'm not positive, but it looks like it. It might be Latin. I don't know. I don't know what it means. So y'all let me know down below what it means. I will probably Google it at some point if I remember, but I don't. The obscene rites practiced by the latter Bacchanalia and Dionysia were no more representative of the standards of purity originally upheld by the mysteries than the orgies occasionally occurring among the adherents of Christianity till the 18th century were representative of primitive Christianity. Sir William Hamilton, British minister at the court of Naples, declares that in 1780, Acernia, a community of Christians in Italy, worshipped with phallic ceremonies the pagan god Priapus under the name of Saint Cosmo. See two essays on the worship of Priapus by Richard Payne Knight. Most of the saint worship is actually worshiping a pagan. Father, mother, and child constitute the natural trinity. I'll grant you that one, I guess. The mysteries glorify the home as the supreme institution, consisting of this trinity functioning as a unit. Pythagoras likened the universe to the family, declaring that as the supreme fire of the universe was in the midst of its heavenly bodies, so, by analogy, the supreme fire of the world was upon its hearthstones. The Pythagorean and other schools of philosophy conceived the one divine nature of God to manifest itself in the threefold aspect of father, mother, and child. These three constituted the divine family, whose dwelling place is creation, and whose natural and peculiar symbol is the 47th problem of Euclid. God the Father is spirit, God the Mother is matter, and God the Child, the product of the two, represents the sum of living things born out of and constituting nature. God the Father is the body, God the Mother is the soul, and God the Child is the becoming, right? It is the grounding spirit, the creating spirit, and the becoming. That is what this is. The seed of spirit is sown in the womb of matter, and by an immaculate, pure conception, the progeny is brought into being. Is not this the true mystery of the Madonna holding the holy babe in her arms? Who dares to say that? No, it's not, because you know what? There is a missing piece of the Trinity in that particular picture, boss. Who dares to say that such symbolism is improper? The mystery of life is the supreme mystery, revealed in all of its divine dignity and glorified as nature's per feet achievement by the initiated sages and seers of all ages. The prudery of today, however, declares this same mystery to be unfit for the consideration of holy-minded people. Contrary to the dictates of reason, a standard has been established which affirms that innocence bred of ignorance is more to be desired than virtue born of knowledge. Eventually, however, man will learn that he need never be ashamed of truth. Until he does learn this, he is false to his God, to his world, and to himself. In this respect, Christianity has woefully failed in its mission. That's because it is on the wrong mission, and if you don't know what I mean, I have an unconventional Bible study that can help you out. While declaring man's body to be the living temple of the living God, in the same breath it asserts the substances and functions of this temple to be unclean, and their study defiling to the sensitive sentiments of the righteous. By this unwholesome attitude, man's body, the house of God, is degraded and defamed. Yet, the cross itself is the oldest of phallic emblems. Oh my God. And the lozenge-shaped windows of cathedrals are proof that yonic symbols have survived the destruction of the pagan mysteries. All right. We have talked before, we will talk again, but this is one of those things where this is inserting symbolism where it does not necessarily belong. The fucking windows do not represent a vulva. I'm sorry, that is just reaching. That is pushing too hard. The phallic symbol being the cross, again, that is you pushing that. They had valid reasons for their cross. Both the Ankh, which is a representation of the cross that predates Christ by several generations at a minimum. We'll leave it at that. But there is a constant theme of self-insertion, right? My religion came along later, and of course all of you didn't understand it, but you were representing it automatically because my religion is the right one and you're wrong. Like, literally wrong. And it's annoying. It is, right? Like, the windows, are you kidding me? The windows are there to let in light. They're there to be beautiful. They're not there to represent a fucking vagina. That is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. The very structure of the church itself is permeated with phallicism. Remove from the Christian church all emblems of priapic origin, and nothing is left. For even the earth upon which is this is the problem that Freud had, right? Freud was completely fucking thrown off, and I don't understand how people listen to him, right? This is the same problem of the self-insertion of a narrative that does not necessarily belong there. You can pick up symbols and they don't represent a dick. It is entirely possible that this was not meant to be a penis. Sorry, I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed with that. For even the earth upon which it stands was, because of its fertility, the first yonic symbol. I mean, come on. Is that not a self-insertion? Am I wrong on that? Is that not just taking something? The planet obviously represents a vulva, right? I watched a video yesterday. This is probably why I'm so annoyed with this. I watched a video yesterday. Y'all know I have been watching Jason of Archaics. He has a lot of good information, but yes, I watched a video. He had this guy on mud floods or something. And I'm watching, and I take things with a grain of salt, right? I know some things, and I don't know some things, so I take it for granted that I don't know some things. And I am willing to be educated on some things. But this guy, I got halfway through the presentation, and he pulled up a picture of Venus. Or actually, he pulled up a picture of Jupiter and was calling it Venus. And then he had the spot, right? The great red spot, which has changed, by the way. And he's like, he compared the red spot to a vagina, right? It was the same type of self-insertion that we see right here. And he distorted it, right? He took it and squashed it down so that it was no longer circular, which it naturally is, and turned it into an ovular shape. And then he zoomed in on it, and he's like, look, it's a vagina. And he's all like, he. And like, it was the wildest thing. And he received no pushback for that, right? He's all like, oh, look, there's hairs. And then he talked about there's a latch that holds the vajayjay into place. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. Like, that's it. I can't even take this with salt anymore, right? This is beyond the point of consideration anymore. And so I'm still probably a little bit perturbed about that. And I'm seeing this and I'm like, this is the exact same problem. Like, the exact same problem. There are absolutely representations of the meat and the greed, right? There's the representations of that all over the place. You don't have to look hard for them. They look hard for you. The problem is that you want to see the thing that you believe in everything. And I understand the want to there. But all you are doing is shitting on any credibility that you had built. This type of self insertion removes all credibility whatsoever. And that's why I'm mad, because there's good information in here. There's some bad information in here too. We have begun sorting through it. This is bad information. There are phallic symbols. They are important. There are vulva symbols. They are important, but they are obvious when they are made. They are not just something. Now, obelisks were not meant to represent a penis. I'm sorry to tell y'all, there is a greater, deeper meaning behind an obelisk. There is. We're not going to get into it today, though. That is going to wait, because I do believe that it's coming further along in this particular series. But it is not to be a penis. The pyramids were not to be a penis. Quit trying that. It is annoying. It is. It really is. As the presence of these emblems of the generative processes is either unknown or unheeded by the majority, that's because it is a self-insertion. The irony of the situation is not generally appreciated. Only those conversant with the secret language of antiquity are capable of understanding the divine significance of these emblems. Flowers were chosen as symbols for many reasons. The great variety of flora made it possible to find some plant or flower which would be a suitable figure for nearly any abstract quality or condition. A plant might be chosen because of some myth connected with its origin, as the stories of Daphne and Narcissus, because of the peculiar environment in which they thrived, as the orchid and the fungus, because of its significant shape, as the passion flower and the Easter lily, because of its brilliance or fragrance, as in the verbena and the sweet lavender, because it preserved its form indefinitely, as the everlasting flower, because of the unusual characteristics of the sunflower and heliotrope, which have long been sacred because of their affinity for the sun. The plant might also be considered worthy of veneration because from its crushed leaves, petals, stalks, or roots could be extracted healing unctions, essences, or drugs affecting the nature and intelligence of human beings, such as the poppy and the ancient herbs of prophecy, which is marijuana, by the way. The plant might also be regarded as efficacious in the cure of many diseases because its fruit, leaves, petals, or roots bore a resemblance in shape or color to parts or organs of the human body. For example, the distilled juices of certain species of ferns, also the hairy moss growing upon oaks, and the thistledown were said to have the power of growing hair. The dentaria, which resembles a tooth in shape, was said to cure the toothache, and the Palma Christi plant, because of its shape, cured all afflictions of the hands. And it's funny because I do believe that he has pulled the examples that are least applicable in real life. There are absolutely plants that can help you. As far as I know, no fern, hairy moss, or thistledown grows hair. If so, we would have a lot less bald people running around. There would be less surgeries to take the butt hair and put it on your head if they were able to go out and pick some moss and extract the juice and make hair grow on their head. Right? If nothing else, pharma would have done it. So this probably doesn't work. I'm not familiar with dentaria, which resembles a tooth in shape, and it may, in fact, cure a toothache. The Palma Christi plant, again, I'm not familiar with. How's it? All afflictions of the hand. That is a lot of stuff. You got rheumatoid arthritis. You've got fractures. You've got what do we got? We got carpal tunnel. We've got there's all kinds of stuff. And you're telling me it just takes care of everything hand related? No, again, self-insertion, right? That is the problem with a lot of herbology. But bear in mind, there are a lot of actually beneficial plants that do, in fact, resemble, in large part, the things that they help. We can't get into an exhaustive list of those today, but they are there and you can find them on the internet. There are a myriad of home remedies derived from these plants that appear to work. I am not a medical professional. I am not an herbologist, and I am not dispensing medical information here, right? I deal with working with energy, not necessarily with drinking of plants. But there is something there to look at. But he pulled the worst examples of it. That's wild. The blossom is really the reproductive system of the plant and is therefore singularly appropriate as a symbol of sexual purity. Why? Because it gets pregnant? An absolute requisite of the ancient mysteries. Thus, the flower signifies this ideal of beauty and regeneration which must ultimately take the place of lust and degeneracy. Of all symbolic flowers, the locust blossom of India and Egypt and the rose of the Rosicrucians are the most important. In their symbolism, these two flowers are considered identical. The esoteric doctrines for which the Eastern lotus stands have been perpetuated in modern Europe under the form of a rose. The rose and the lotus are yonic emblems, signifying primarily the maternal creative mystery, while the Easter lily is considered to be phallic. The Brahmin and Egyptian initiates, who undoubtedly understood the secret systems of spiritual culture, whereby the latent centers of cosmic energy in man may be stimulated, employed the lotus blossoms to represent the spinning vortices of spiritual energy located at various points along the spinal column and called chakras or whirling wheels by the Hindus. 7 of these chakras are of prime importance and have their individual correspondences in the nerve ganglia and plexus. According to the secret schools, the sacred ganglion is called the 4-petaled lotus, the prostatic plexus, the 6-petaled locus, the epigastric plexus and navel, the 10-petaled lotus, the cardiac plexus, the 12-petaled lotus, the pharyngeal plexus, the 16-petaled locus, the cavernous plexus, the 2-petaled lotus, and the pineal gland, or adjacent unknown center, the 1,000-petaled locus. The color, size, and number of petals upon the lotus are the keys to understanding its symbolic import. A hint concerning the unfoldment of spiritual understanding according to the secret science of the mysteries is found in the story of Aaron's rod that budded, and also in Wagner's great opera, Tannhäuser, where the budding staff of the Pope signifies the unfolding blossoms on the sacred rod of the mysteries, the spinal column. All right, let's dive back into this real quick. According to the secret schools, right, the sacral ganglion and the prostatic plexus, well, that is terminology wrong. We have the base and we have the sacral. Those are two different things. The base is right about where your butthole is. The sacral is actually located around the exact same area that the prostate is. It is inside and up a little bit, right? It is at the very base of your spinal column is where that particular locus is. The epigastric is the solar plexus, represented by 10. The cardiac, which is your heart. The pharyngeal, which is the throat. The cavernous is the third eye, which is the pineal gland. And this says, and the pineal gland, or adjacent unknown center, which is the fucking crown. Like, how do you write this and you don't know these basic parts? Right? These 7 aren't even really in dispute. Some other systems take these 7 and add a lot more to them. And I don't know whether that is true or not. I deal with the 7 internal and the 1 external. 7, that is 8. Get them right at least. This lets me know that he did not quite understand what he was talking about here, right? This is part of the revelatory experience. When you go through, this is part, well, I can't say you, but when I went through the revelatory experience, this is one of the things that was revealed to me. The 7 internal chakras and the 8th one on the outside that you do have access to. We have other videos talking about these things. Got to get the terminology right. I am not enjoying this chapter much at all. Not going to lie. The Tree of the Knights of the Round Table. I cannot make out the words there. I'm sorry. But y'all can go back and check it out. This is apparently the Knights, right? You got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 9 here. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 9. That's interesting. This remarkable example of the use of the tree in symbolism from the Château de Pierrefonds in the little town of Pierrefonds, northern France. The 8 branches end in conventional cup-like flowers, from each of which rises the body of a knight carrying in his hand a ribbon bearing his name. The central stem is surmounted by a larger flower, from which emerges the body of King Arthur himself. The tree is a favorite motif in heraldry. The one trunk with its multitude of branches caused the tree to be frequently used in diagramming family lineage, from which practice has arisen the custom of terming such tables family trees. The Rosicrucians used a garland of roses to signify the same spiritual vortices, which are referred to in the Bible as the 7 lamps of the candlestick, the 7 churches of Asia. That is another self-insertion. We have dealt with that. In the 1642 edition of Sir Francis Bacon's History of the Henry VII is a frontispiece showing Lord Bacon with Rosicrucian roses for shoe buckles. In the system of philosophy, each petal of the lotus bears a certain symbol. In the Hindu system of philosophy, each petal of the lotus bears a certain symbol, which gives an added clue to the meaning of the flower. The Orientals also use the lotus plant to signify the growth of man through the 3 periods of human consciousness: ignorance, endeavor, and understanding. As the lotus exists in the 3 elements, earth, water, and air, so man lives in 3 worlds: material, intellectual, and spiritual. As the plant with its roots in the mud and the slime grows upward through the water and finally blossoms in the light and air, so the spiritual growth of man is upward from the darkness of base action and desire into the light of truth and understanding. The water serving as a symbol of the ever-changing world of illusion through which the soul must pass in its struggle to reach the state of spiritual illumination. The rose and its Eastern equivalent, the lotus, like all beautiful flowers, represent spiritual unfoldment and attainment. Hence, the Eastern deities are often shown seated upon the open petals of lotus blossoms. Now, this is actually true. This is the actual symbology that is actually used in many of these cases. So I don't have as much exception with that. The lotus was also a universal motif in Egyptian art and architecture. The roofs of many temples were upheld by lotus columns, signifying the eternal wisdom, and the lotus-headed scepter, symbolic of self-unfoldment and divine prerogative, was often carried in religious processions. When the flower had 9 petals, it was symbolic of man, when 12 of the universe and the gods, when 7 of the planets and the law, when 5 of the senses and the mysteries, and when 3 of the chief deities and the worlds. The heraldic rose of the Middle Ages generally has either 5 or 10 petals, thereby showing its relationship to the spiritual mystery of man through the Pythagorean pentad and decad. Cultus Arborum. The worship of trees as proxies of divinity was prevalent throughout the ancient world. Temples were often built in the heart of sacred groves, and nocturnal ceremonials were conducted under the wide-spreading branches of great trees, fantastically decorated and festooned in honor of their patron deities. In many instances, the trees themselves were believed to possess the attributes of divine power and intelligence, and therefore supplications were often addressed to them. The beauty, dignity, massiveness, and strength of oaks, elms, and cedars led to their adoption as symbols of power, integrity, permanence, virility, and divine protection. Several ancient peoples Notably, the Hindus and Scandinavians regarded the macrocosm, or grand universe, as a divine tree growing from a single seed sown in space. The Greeks, Persians, the Greeks, Persians, Chaldeans, and Japanese have legends describing the axle tree, or reed, upon which the earth revolves. Kapila declares the universe to be the eternal tree, Brahma, which springs from an imperceptible and intangible seed, the material monad. The medieval Kabbalists represented creation as a tree, with its roots in the reality of spirit and its branches in the illusion of tangible existence. The Sephirotic tree of the Kabbalah was therefore inverted, with its roots in heaven and its branches upon the earth. Madame Blavatsky notes that the Great Pyramid was considered to be a symbol of this inverted tree, with its root at the apex of the pyramid and its branches diverging into four streams towards the base. The Scandinavian world tree, Yggdrasil, supports on its branches 9 spheres or worlds, which the Egyptians symbolized by the 9 stamens of the persea, or avocado. All of these are enclosed within the mysterious 10th sphere, or cosmic egg, the definitionless cipher of the mysteries. The Kabbalistic tree of the Jews also consists of 9 branches, or worlds, emanating from the first cause, or crown, which surrounds its emanations as the shell surrounds the egg. The single source of life and the endless diversity of its expression has a perfect analogy in the structure of the tree. The trunk represents the single origin of all diversity. The roots, deeply embedded in the dark earth, are symbolic of divine nutriment, and its multiplicity of branches spreading from the central trunk represents the infinity of universal effects dependent upon a single cause. The tree has also been accepted as symbolic of the microcosm, that is, man. According to the esoteric doctrine, man first exists potentially within the body of the world tree, and later blossoms forth into objective manifestation upon its branches. According to an early Greek mystery myth, the god Zeus fabricated the third race of men from ash trees. The serpent, so often shown wound around the trunk of the tree, usually signifies the mind, the power of thought, and is the eternal tempter, or urge, which leads all rational creatures to the ultimate discovery of reality, and thus overthrows the rule of the gods. The serpent, hidden in the foliage of the universal tree, represents the cosmic mind, and in the human tree, the individualized intellect. The concept that all life originates from seeds caused grain and various plants to be accepted as emblematic of the human spermatozoon, and the tree was therefore symbolic of organized life unfolding in its primitive germ. The growth of the universe from its primitive seed may be likened to a growth of the mighty oak from the tiny acorn. While the tree is apparently much greater than its own source, nevertheless that source contains potentially every branch, twig, and leaf which will later be objectively unfolded by the process of growth. Man's veneration for trees as symbols of the abstract qualities of wisdom and integrity also led him to designate as trees those individuals who possessed these divine qualities to an apparently superhuman degree. Highly illumined philosophers and priests were, therefore, often referred to as trees or tree men. For example, the Druids, whose name, according to one interpretation, signifies the men of the oak trees, or the initiates of certain Syrian mysteries who were called cedars. In fact, it is far more credible and probable that the famous cedars of Lebanon, cut down for the building of King Solomon's temple, were really illumined, initiated sages. How does that make sense? The mystic knows that the true supports of God's glorious house were not the logs subject to decay, but the immortal and imperishable intellects of the tree hierophants. Okay, again, we're dealing with somebody inserting definitions into something, right? I do not even understand how you could possibly construe that the cedars of Lebanon, which were literal trees that were recorded as being cut down, formed into rafts, floated to Jerusalem, and used to construct the temple, right? There is no doubt as to what these things were, how they were harvested, how they were transported, and how they were used. There is no doubt. Like, you can doubt that Solomon's temple was a thing. You can't doubt that they used cedars in it. To say that this was, well, they just killed off all the wise people, that's a little bit wild for me, right? They cut down the initiated sages, or are you saying that they assimilated them, which is a whole different ball of, yeah, that's not heretical at all. Now, I do not hold that Solomon was a good person in any way, shape, or form. I do not believe that he was the wisest man to ever rule the earth. I do not believe most of what is said about him. I went back and read the book, and I see what it actually says about him, and so I don't get down with him like that. But it is entirely possible that he would take somebody's acolytes and use them in his own thing. He was not necessarily restricted to the Hebrew God in any way, shape, or form. Trees are repeatedly mentioned in the Old and New Testaments, and in the scriptures of various pagan nations. The tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, mentioned in Genesis, the burning bush in which the angel appeared to Moses, the famous vine and fig tree of the New Testament, the grove of olives in the Garden of Gethsemane where Jesus went to pray, and the miraculous tree of Revelation, which bore the 12 manners of fruit, and whose leaves were for the healing of the nation. All bear witness to the esteem in which trees were held by the scribes of Holy Writ. Buddha received his illumination while under the Bodhi tree, near Madras in India, and several of the Eastern gods are pictured sitting in meditation beneath the spreading branches of mighty trees. Many of the great sages and saviors carried wands, rods, or staves cut from the wood of sacred trees, as the rods of Moses and Aaron, Gungnir, the spear of Odin, cut from the tree of life, and the consecrated rod of Hermes, around which the fighting serpents entwined themselves. The numerous uses which the ancients made of the tree and its products are factors in its symbolism. Its worship was, to a certain degree, based upon its usefulness. Of this, J.P. Lundy writes, "Trees occupy an important place in the economy of nature by way of attracting and retaining moisture, and shading the water sources and the soil so as to prevent barrenness and desolation." That is true. Are so useful to man for shade, for fruit, for medicine, for fuel, for building houses and ships, for furniture, for almost every department of life, that it is no wonder that some of the more conspicuous ones, such as the oak, the pine, and the palm, and the sycamore, have been made sacred and used for worship. See Monumental Christianity. This is the tree of Noah. Okay, apparently this is the family tree. Here you have Africa, Europa. That's interesting. Most Bibles published during the Middle Ages contained a section devoted to genealogical tables, showing the descent of humanity from Father Adam to the advent of Jesus Christ. The tree growing from the roof of the ark represents the body of Noah and its 3 branches, his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or somebody else's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The nation of the descendants of Noah's 3 sons. I did not transfer that over. I'm sorry, y'all. This is the tree. Y'all get to look at it again. Right? This is supposed to be Shem. It ain't even spelled right. The nations by the descent of Noah's 3 sons are appropriately shown in the circles upon the branches of the tree. While such tables are hopelessly incorrect from a historical point of view, to the symbolists, their allegorical interpretations are of inestimable importance. The early fathers of the church sometimes used the tree to symbolize Christ. They believed that ultimately Christianity would grow up like a mighty oak and overshadow all faiths of mankind. They were wrong, because it annually discards its foliage. The tree was also looked upon as an appropriate emblem of resurrection and reincarnation. For though apparently dying each fall, it blossomed forth again with renewed verdure each ensuing spring. Under the appellations of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil is concealed the greatest arcanum of antiquity, the mystery of equilibrium. That is true. The tree of life represents the spiritual point of balance, the secret of immortality. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, as its name implies, represents polarity or unbalance, the secret of mortality. The Kabbalists reveal this by assigning the central column of their Sephirothic diagram to the tree of life, and the two side branches to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They are doing it wrong. Unbalanced forces perish in the void, declares the secret word, and all is made known. That is true. The apple represents the knowledge of the procreative processes, by the awakening of which the material universe was established. The allegory of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden is a cosmic myth, revealing the methods of universal and individual establishment. The literal story, accepted for so many centuries by an unthinking world, is preposterous, but the creative mystery of which the symbol is one of nature's profundest verities. The Ophites, serpent worshippers, revered the Edenic snake because it was the cause of individual existence. Though humanity is still wandering in a world of good and evil, it will, ultimately, attain completion and eat of the fruit of the tree of life growing in the midst of the illusionary garden of worldly things. Thus, the tree of life is also the appointed symbol of the mysteries, and by partaking of its fruit, man attains immortality. And here we have another problem. I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. We have already discussed this before, but let's talk about it again, right? There is a creative side and a grounding side. It is light and dark. It is two pillars, and the Masons call it Boaz and Joachim, right? One of these we have seen several times being represented. Everybody wants to use the grounding energy. Apparently they think it's the only one. But the other energy is the creative energy. It comes from the top. Everybody wants to pull their energy from the base and bring it all the way to the top. But there are two sources of energy that you have access to. One is a grounding one. It is the bottom one. It is represented by black. And one is a creative one. It is the upper one, and it is represented by white. And you have to use both of them in order to have a fulfilling journey through enlightenment. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is the bottom one. It is the black one that everybody uses. It is the knowledge of sin. The other one is the white one, which is the tree of life, and it gives you the knowledge that you don't have to sin. It is the generative of the two, right? The one in the bottom receives more than it gives, and the one at the top gives more than it receives. But you are meant to be in a balance of the two. It does not bestow immortality. It gives you the ability to flip the switch to end your life. There's going to be some people who don't like hearing that one, but there is a switch located inside of your mind that you can disconnect from this reality completely. It is a thing. You don't get access to it until you are in balance, and then you don't want to use it. You are not meant to be immortal on this plane. It will never be a thing that you are meant to be immortal on this plane. You are meant to embrace your life on this plane. And that is the whole point of using the other energy. It is not to give you immortality. It is not even to guarantee immortality in the other side. And that's where everybody's got it twisted. They are living for this future reward in Christianity. It's just severely misconstrued, to say the very least. I have a whole Bible study. Don't come at me. You can. I won't respond. But the tree of life is not about becoming immortal here or even becoming immortal there. It is about living your fullest life here. It is about the life here. Okay, back to the text. The oak, the pine, the ash, the cypress, and the palm are the 5 trees of greatest symbolic importance. I have a wand made from a several 100-year-old cypress tree taproot that I use. It's just a tool, it has no power in and of itself. The Father God of the mysteries was often worshipped under the form of an oak, the Savior God, frequently the world martyr, in the form of a pine, the world axis and divine nature of humanity in the form of an ash, the goddesses or maternal principle in the form of a cypress, and the positive pole of generation in the form of the inflorescence of the mate date palm. The pine cone is a phallic symbol of remote antiquity. The Thyrsus of Bacchus, a long wand or staff surmounted by a pine cone or cluster of grapes and entwined with ivy or grapevine leaves, sometimes ribbons, signifies that the wonders of nature may only be accomplished by the aid of solar virility, as symbolized by the cone or grapes. Hey, psst. I got at least one more piece of knowledge to throw at you here. Pine cones are female. Did you know that? They are. They're the seed-bearing fruit. They're the part that takes in the pollen that is excluded from other pine trees. And so it can be a male phallic symbol if it is an actual tree vulva, right? Right? I mean, it has to be at least that. In the Phrygian mysteries, Attis, the ever-present sun savior, dies under the branches of the pine tree, an allusion to the solar globe at the winter solstice. And for this reason, the pine tree was sacred to his cult. This tree was also sacred in the mysteries of Dionysus and Apollo. Among the ancient Egyptians and Jews, the acacia, or tamarisk, was held in the highest religious esteem, and among modern Masons, branches of acacia, cypress, cedar, or evergreen are still regarded as the most significant emblems. The shittim wood, used by the children of Israel in the construction of the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant, was a species of acacia. In describing this sacred tree, Albert Pike has written, "The genuine acacia, also, is the thorny tamarisk, the same tree which grew around the body of Osiris. It was a sacred tree among the Arabs, who made of it the idol Al-Uzza, which Muhammad destroyed. It is abundant as a bush in the desert of Thur, and it is the crown of thorns, and of it the crown of thorns was composed, which was set on the forehead of Jesus of Nazareth. It is a fit type of immortality on account of its tenacity of life, for it has been known, when planted as a doorpost, to take root again and shoot out budding boughs above the threshold." See Morals and Dogma. It is quite possible that much of the veneration accorded to the acacia is due to the particular attributes of the mimosa, or sensitive plant, with which it was often identified by the ancients. There is a Coptic legend to the effect that the sensitive plant was the first of all trees or shrubs to worship Christ. The rapid growth of the acacia and its beauty have also caused it to be regarded as emblematic of the fecundity and generation. Here's another little piece of knowledge that you may or may not be aware of. This tree, Mimosa hostilis in particular, is the plant with the most dimethyltryptamate in North America. You can find in the roots of the Mimosa hostilis plant enough chemicals to allow you to take a DMT trip if properly extracted in the correct manners and used with MAOI inhibitors. You can take Mimosa hostilis plant, which is a purple dye, by the way, and use that to awaken, right? That is one of the tools that will unlock the doors. I am an advocate of only using the tools after you have already unlocked the doors. The tools can unlock doors that you necessarily want open, but do not know how to control. And so when you hear of somebody having a bad trip, they have unlocked a door that they were not prepared to unlock. And So, while you can use various herbs to unlock the potentiality in your mind, you will almost certainly do it wrong if you are trying to do that. It will unlock, but you will have a problem closing the door back. It is not recommended to do this at all unless you are being done by someone very experienced in these particular battles. The symbolism of the acacia is susceptible to four distinct interpretations. 1. It is the emblem of the vernal equinox, the annual resurrection of the solar deity. 2. Under the form of the sensitive plant which shrinks from human touch, the acacia signifies purity and innocence, as one of the Greek meanings of its name implies. It fittingly typifies human immortality and regeneration, and under the form of the evergreen represents that immortal part of man which survives the destruction of his visible nature. 4. It is the ancient and revered emblem of the mysteries and candidates entering their tortuous passageways in which the ceremonials were given, carried in their hands branches of the sacred plants or small clusters of sanctified flowers, and I just explained why that might be. Albert G. Mackey calls attention to the fact that each of the ancient mysteries had its own peculiar plant sacred to the gods or goddesses in whose honor the rituals were celebrated. These sacred plants were later adopted as the symbols of the various degrees in which they were used. Thus, in the mysteries of Adonis, lettuce was sacred. In the Brahmin and Egyptian rites, the lotus. Among the Druids, the mistletoe. And among certain of the Greek mysteries, the myrtle. And again, I have described to you why this might be a thing. Each one of these, indeed, will allow something. Now, this lettuce that they considered sacred was probably not the head lettuce that you buy at the store. But we have a thing called wild lettuce here in North America, and I am sure that it is in various other places as well. And you can take the milk that comes from this particular plant and you can distill it and use it to create a substance that will help you with pain and will also open up some doors if properly applied. And so that is almost certainly the reason for it. Now, the myrtle, I'm not familiar with, but lettuce, wild lettuce, absolutely. The lotus, absolutely can be used for this. The mistletoe, indeed, can be used for this. And I'm going to assume the myrtle has similar properties, even though I have never investigated it, because everything else listed here you can distill into a medicine that will allow you to unlock doors. As the legend of Kairam Abif is based upon the ancient Egyptian mystery ritual of the murder and resurrection of Osiris, it is natural that the sprig of acacia should be preserved as symbolic of the resurrection of Kairam. The chest containing the body of Osiris was washed ashore near Byblos and lodged in the roots of a tamarisk or acacia, which, growing into a mighty tree, enclosed within its trunk the body of the murdered god. This is undoubtedly the origin story of that a sprig of acacia marks the grave of Kairam. The mystery of the evergreen marking the grave of the dead sun god is also perpetuated in the Christmas tree. The apricot and quince are familiar Ionic symbols, while the bunch of grapes and the fig are phallic. The pomegranate is the mystic fruit of the Eleusinian rites. By eating it, Proserpine brought herself to the realms of Pluto. The fruit here signifies the sensuous life, which, once tasted, temporarily deprives man of immortality. Also, on account of its vast number of seeds, the pomegranate was often employed to represent natural fecundity. For the same reason, Jacob Bryant, in his Ancient Mythology, notes that the ancients recognized in this fruit an appropriate emblem of the Ark of the Deluge, which contained the seeds of a new human race. Among the ancient mysteries, the pomegranate was also considered to be a divine symbol of such peculiar significance that its true explanation could not be divulged. It was termed by the Kabiri the forbidden secret. Many Greek gods and goddesses are depicted holding the fruit or flower of the pomegranate in their hands, evidently to signify that they are givers of life and plenty. Pomegranate capitals were placed upon the pillars of Jachin and Boaz, standing in front of King Solomon's temple, and by the order of Jehovah, pomegranate blossoms were embroidered upon the bottom of the high priest's ephod. This is a picture of the sunflower. The above diagram illustrates a curious experiment in plant magnetism reproduced with several other experiments in Athanasius Kirsch's rare volume on magnetism. Oh, I would love to get my hands on that. I might have to look it up. Y'all remind me to look that up. Several plants were sacred to the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Hindus because of the peculiar effect which the sun exerted over them. As it is difficult for a man to look upon the face of the sun without being blinded by the light, those plants which turned and deliberately faced the solar orb were considered typical of very highly advanced souls. Since the sun was regarded as the personification of the supreme deity, those forms of life over which it exercised marked influence were venerated as being sacred to divinity. The sunflower, because of its plainly perceptible affinity for the sun, was given high rank among sacred plants. I'm going to stop just for 1 second to debunk something. There is, on TikTok, several videos going around talking about, well, these sunflowers aren't chasing the sun. That is because they stop. Once they start putting on seeds, they quit turning to face the sun. And apparently, these farmers who are making this particular video series are trying to deceive people into believing that there is something different about the sun, and there is, and that is causing the plants to not face them in the same way. That part's not true. There is something different about the sun. I got a video on that. There's something different about the sun, but these plants are doing exactly what they have been doing for the last 10,000 years. My neighbor grows sunflowers. I have watched it happen. I grew sunflowers 1 year, and I watched it. I remember when it stopped following the sun, and I was like, what's going on? And then I read, and I was like, oh, when they start putting on seeds, their head becomes too heavy to continue turning. Who would have thunk it? And there are people out there trying to intentionally mislead people by talking about that, right? Just wanted to put that out there in case you have seen it and have wondered yourself what is going on with that. That is a natural part of the process. They follow the sun until they start putting on too much weight for that to be effective. Strong wine made from the juice of the grape was looked upon as symbolic of the false life and false light of the universe, for it was produced by a false process, artificial fermentation. The rational faculties are clouded by strong drink, and the animal nature, liberated from bondage, controls the individual. Facts, which necessarily were of the greatest spiritual significance. As the lower nature is the eternal tempter, seeking to co-lead man into excesses which inhibit the spiritual faculties, the grape and its product were used to symbolize the adversary. The juice of the grape was thought by the Egyptians to resemble human blood more closely than it did any other substance. In fact, they believed that the grape secured its life from the blood of the dead who had been buried in the earth. According to Plutarch, the priest of the sun at the Heliopolis never carry any wine into their temples, and if they made use of it at any time in their libations to the gods, it was not because they looked upon it as its own nature acceptable to them, but they poured it upon their altars as the blood of those enemies who formerly had fought against them. For they look upon the vine to have first sprung out of the earth after it was fattened with the carcasses of those who fell in the wars against the gods. And this, say they, is the reason why drinking its juice in great quantities makes men mad and beside themselves, filling them, as it were, with the blood of their own ancestors. There is a demonization of intoxication, right? There is a demonization of alcohol. You are meant to use alcohol. Man has evolved right alongside alcohol. As long as we have been collecting and storing things, we have discovered that they will do this on their own. If you take and squeeze the juice and put it in a jar, it will ferment all by itself. There's no artificial process that you have to employ. You can distill, you can do several other things to make it happen faster, but all it takes is a little bit of juice in a bucket and it will do it all by itself. And so in part that is wrong, right? In another part they are talking about the demonization of intoxication. Well, you're not meant to be fully intoxicated all of the time, but you are meant to drink. It helps your digestion, it helps your gut. I don't particularly care for the taste of alcohol, but I'll have it every once in a while just to help my stomach. You're not meant to be a drunk. But if you're not on the path of enlightenment, you're going to seek that because that is where you're going to get your feeling of happiness from. It is a temptation, absolutely, but it is not one that you are supposed to completely put off, unless you in particular have a problem. Now, some people have problems. They have no self-control, and so they cannot say, I don't want another drink. If that is you, then by all means, don't drink. But if that's not you, you're meant to enjoy yourself every once in a while. Not every day. You're not supposed to drink even to the point of passing out. That's excess. But it's okay to have fun. It's okay to enjoy the thing which God has absolutely made available to you and is in large part responsible for the fact that we have people. If it was not for the ability to create wine and vinegar, we would be in severe problems here. We probably would not be here, as a matter of fact. Among some cults, the state of intoxication was viewed as a condition somewhat akin to ecstasy, for the individual was believed to be possessed by the universal spirit of life, whose chosen vehicle was the wine. In the mysteries, the grape was often used to symbolize lust and debauchery because of its demoralizing effect upon the emotional nature. The fact was recognized, however, that fermentation was the certain evidence of the presence of solar fire. Hence, the grape was accepted as the proper symbol of the solar spirit, the giver of divine enthusiasm. In a somewhat similar manner, Christians have accepted wine as the emblem of the blood of Christ, partaking of it in Holy Communion. Christ, the exoteric emblem of the solar spirit, said, I am the vine. He was therefore worshipped with the wine of ecstasy in the same manner as were his pagan prototypes, Bacchus, Dionysus, Ares, and Adonis. The Mandragora officinarum, or mandrake, is accredited with possessing the most remarkable magical powers. Its narcotic properties were recognized by the Greeks, who employed it to deaden pain during surgical operations, and it has been identified also with Baras, the mystic herb used by the Jews for casting out demons. In the Jewish Wars, Josephus describes the method of securing the Baras, which he declares emits flashes of lightning and destroys all who seek to touch it, unless they proceed according to certain rules, supposedly formulated by King Solomon himself. Really? The occult properties of the mandrake, while little understood, have been responsible for the adoption of the plant as a talisman capable of increasing the value or quantity of anything with which it was associated. As a phallic charm, the mandrake was considered to be an infallible cure for sterility. It was one of the priapic symbols which the Knights Templar were accused of worshipping. The root of the plant closely resembles a human body and often bore the outlines of the human head, arms, or legs. This striking similarity between the body of a man and the mandragora is one of the puzzles of natural science and is the real basis for the veneration in which this plant was held. In Isis Unveiled, Madame Blavatsky notes that the mandragora seems to occupy upon Earth the point where vegetable and animal kingdoms meet, as the zoophytes and polypi do in the sea. This thought opens a vast field of speculation concerning the nature of this animal plant. According to popular superstition, the mandrake shrank from being touched and, crying out with a human voice, clung desperately to the soil with which it was embedded. Anyone who heard its cry while plucking it either immediately died or went mad. To circumvent this tragedy, it was customary to dig around the roots of the mandrake until the plant was thoroughly loosened, and then to tie one end of a cord about the stalk and fasten the other end to a dog. The dog, obeying his master's call, thereupon dragged the root from the earth and became the victim of the mandragora curse. When once uprooted, the plant could be handled with immunity. During the Middle Ages, mandrake charms brought great prices, and an art was evolved by which the resemblance between the mandragora root and the human body was considerably accentuated. Like most superstitions, the belief in the peculiar powers of the mandrake was founded upon an ancient secret doctrine concerning the true nature of the plant. It is slightly narcotic, says Eliphas Levi, and an aphrodisiacal virtue was ascribed to it by the ancients, who represented it as being sought by Thessalian sorcerers for the composition of philters. Is this root the umbilical vestige of our terrestrial origin, as a certain magical mysticism has suggested? We dare not affirm it seriously, but it is true all the same that man issued from the slime of the earth, and his first appearance must have been in the form of a rough sketch. The analogies of nature compel us to admit the notion, at least a possibility. The first men were, in this case, a family of gigantic, sensitive mandragores, animated by the sun, who rooted themselves up from the earth. See Transcendental Magic, and I do not believe that even in part. The homely onion was revered by the Egyptians as a symbol of the universe because its rings and layers represented the concentric planes into which creation was divided according to the Hermetic mysteries. It was also regarded as possessing great medicinal virtue. Because of the peculiar properties resulting from its pungency, the garlic plant was a powerful agent in transcendental magic. To this day, no better medium has been found for the treatment of obsession. Vampirism and certain forms of insanity, especially those resulting from mediumship and the influences of elemental larvae, respond immediately to the use of garlic. In the Middle Ages, its presence in a house was believed to ward off all evil powers. Tools do nothing by themselves. Trifoliate plants, such as the shamrock, were employed by many religious cults to represent the principle of the Trinity. St. Patrick is supposed to have used the shamrock to illustrate this doctrine of the true divinity. The reason for the additional sanctity conferred by a fourth leaf is that the fourth principle of the Trinity is man, and the presence of this leaf therefore signifies the redemption of humanity. That's a complete misinterpretation. Wreaths were worn during initiation into the mysteries and the reading of sacred books to signify that these processes were consecrated to the deities. On the symbolism of wreaths, Richard Payne Knight writes, instead of beads, wreaths of foliage, generally of laurel, olive, myrtle, ivy, or oak, appear on coins, sometimes encircling these symbolical figures, and sometimes as chaplets upon their heads. All these were sacred to some peculiar personifications of the deity, and significant of some particular attributes, and in general, all evergreens were Dionysic planes, that is, symbols of the generative power, signifying perpetuity of youth and vigor, as the circles of beads and diadems signify perpetuity of existence. See Symbolical Language of Ancient Art and Mythology. And we have finally the Tree of Alchemy, and I am going to steal this one for the thumbnail, so give me 1 second. And we will read what it says. From Museum Hermeticum Reformatum et Amplificatum. The alchemists were wont to symbolize their metals by means of tree, to indicate that all 7 were branches dependent upon the single trunk of solar life. As the 7 spirits depend upon God, and are branches of a tree, of which he is the root, trunk, and spiritual earth from which the root derives its nourishment, so the single trunk of divine life and power nourishes all the multitudinous forms of which the universe is composed. In Gloria Mundi, from which the above illustration is reproduced, there is contained an important thought concerning the plant-like growth of metals. All trees, herbs, stones, metals, and minerals grow and attain perfection without being necessarily touched by any human hand. For the seed is raised up from the ground, puts forth flowers, and bears fruit simply through the agency of natural influences. As it is with plants, so it is with metals. While they lie in the heat of the earth in their natural ore, they grow and are developed, day by day, through the influence of the four elements. Their fire is the splendor of the sun and moon. The earth conceives in her womb the splendor of the sun, and by the seeds of the metals are well and equally warmed, just like grain in the fields. For as each tree of the field has its own peculiar shape, appearance, and fruit, so each mountain bears its own particular ore, these stones and that earth being the soil in which the metals grow. See translation of 1893. And tomorrow will be stones, metals, and gems, which will be more than likely a level of understanding. There were several things that I disagreed with in this, right? But it's symbology. I can be wrong. I always like to take it with a grain of salt, even the things that I believe myself. And so, there are things in here that I vehemently disagree with, right? We talked about them. But if I am proven wrong, I will reform myself about those particular things. I don't believe I'm wrong, or else I would not say the things I do with the certainty that I do. I tend, generally, to not try to extend myself beyond my knowledge. There are things in here that are beyond my knowledge, and there are things in here that are contained within my knowledge. I am here to point out the things that are contained within my knowledge to my best understanding of the situation. All of that to say that I could be wrong, right? But I don't believe I am. The things that I pointed out, I believe are important to point out. The self-insertion problem, it is not a new problem by any means. It is not Manly Hall's problem by any means. It is everybody everywhere always wanting to do. And I do it myself, right? I am here freely telling you I am self-inserting into this the things that I believe. In the same way that I do that, though, they do that without telling you. The cross as a phallic symbol is probably not a thing. It's probably not. There are other explanations for that contained in the night sky. You might want to go back and check on history for that. We will talk about them if they come up, right? I'm not trying to extend this much longer than we're already over an hour. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment, not too much confusion, to a series of somewhat difficult topics. There are definitely points of contention. There are some points of agreement in this particular chapter. There have been kernels of truth and kernels of lies scattered throughout this entire book so far. I am trying to sift away the kernels of untruth. Hopefully I am achieving that without stepping on too many toes. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment, and if you agree or disagree, if it remains respectful, it gets to stay up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks, because I am not a communist. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.